So what did you want to be when you grew up?
Yeah, so for me, a famous footballer was what I wanted to be when I grew up. And safe to say, I've not achieved that. And now at 40 years old, I think it's probably not going to be achievable as well.
Yeah. Did you have any particular player that you wanted to emulate or?
Yeah, like Eric Cantona was on the scene really when I was younger. So I think his whole persona and his footballing ability was something to aspire to. And David Batty as well, like when I was playing when I was younger. Um, he was the powerhouse in midfield, breaking up play, tough tackling. So yeah, that was the position. I've kind of played there and striker. So yeah, when I saw myself, I'm short like David Batty as well. Or as I remember David Batty, he was short. Anyway, I don't actually know his height. But yeah, I have him down as short. I'm all 5'8", so I'm short myself. So yeah, David Batty, Eric Cantona, a hybrid of the two. Don't know what that would have looked like. But...
Would you have played for any team? Was it that kind of thing, or did you have a particular team in mind or anything?
No, I think anybody, really.
Just play the game, basically.
Yes, yeah. In my younger days, I suppose this was kind of late primary school, early teens. Yeah, just loved playing football 4 or 5 times a week, playing for the school, training for school, playing for the Sunday team, training for the Sunday team. Just a lot of time spent playing football, reading Match and Shoot, collecting Panini stickers. Everything football.
Yeah. So was that that was your whole sort of spare time when you were a kid? It was just football, football, football.
Football until kind of the 4th and 5th year of school, where beer, the opposite sex, and music started to all take a bigger part, really. And when I was big into football, we lived in Cornwall, and we lived just outside Truro, and although Cornwall's quite spread out itself, we were close to the school, so access to kind of training and things like that was easy. And then we moved to North Yorkshire, just outside Bedale, and that was more rural, so it was difficult then to access, and there weren't as many teams, which seems weird, really, because I suppose Cornwall's not a place you would associate. There's not loads of footballers from Cornwall or teams down that way, Plymouth and Exeter, really. Whereas Yorkshire, you would think of it as a very footballing kind of county and things. So yeah, just kind of probably coming of that age and it being a bit more difficult to access football.
Yeah.
That dream kind of went away then, really.
Leeds. What is happening? Welcome to episode 18 of Working Hours, a show about a place called Leeds, a time called now, and an activity called work. My name is Simon, and you're listening to my guest, Chris Salt. This is another Zoom interview recorded on the 31st of May 2021. A quick note on this batch of interviews. They were recorded hastily over Zoom, and unfortunately I had to resort to using the mic on my webcam to record my audio, so it's pretty poor. Transcriptions for the podcasts are coming, but for now, please just bear with me. My guest's audio has largely been fine through these interviews, and as these interviews are largely made up of my guests speaking, it shouldn't impair them too much. Going forward, I feel I'm really happy with having the cold open, then music, then a quick intro, then straight back into the interview format, and I want to use my outros on the show for any other business. Letters, news, maybe even some features. Suggestions, of course, are welcome. Email the show at workinghourspod@western-studios.com. It's still important to me that as a listener you get a sense of discovery as you listen to these interviews. It's also important to me that I curate the interviews well, as a podcast and as a social document. That's a process of discovery, finding that balance for myself. Okay, enough diversion, let's crack on. Chris Salt is currently a partnerships executive at Candlelighters Trust. Candlelighters support families facing children's cancer in Yorkshire. They are involved in all sorts of different projects to help ordinary families who are facing extraordinary circumstances. Chris helps Candlelighters build and maintain its donor relationships with businesses. You can find out more about Candlelighters and all the important work that they do at candlelighters.org.uk. If you're a loiner and you're listening to this and you think you might be able to answer questions that you already know all the answers to, then please get in touch with me to arrange a time for us to record for this show. Email me at workinghourspod@western-studios.com with a short bio and some suggestions of your availability. Also, drop me a line if you have any queries or feedback, complaints, compliments. You can leave a review for me. I haven't had any feedback yet, so it would be great to see any. If you can leave a really good review for me, that would be really good.
So what are you doing now?
So now I'm a fundraiser at the charity Candlelighters.
Okay.
So I don't know if you know about Candlelighters or whether that'd be useful.
Yeah, if you tell us a bit about it. And
Yeah, so we support families who've been affected by childhood cancer. So that's predominantly across Yorkshire in terms of our support services. But part of what we do at Candlelighters as well is we invest in research, and that research is internationally recognised. So while there's a Yorkshire element to that, there's an international and wider kind of scope of that as well. So yeah, not quite the professional footballer I'd envisaged, but actually, you know, I'd have probably finished a footballing career now anyway. So who knows where I would have been. So yeah, Candlelighters as a fundraiser, I predominantly work on our business fundraising side. So working with organisations across the county generally about why fundraising is important to them and how that then makes a difference for Candlelighters, the families we support, the services and help that we can offer. So
yeah. So how long have you been doing this now?
So it will be 2 years in July. Very topical. This will date this podcast, but yeah, spent quite a bit of time on furlough, fully furloughed and flexible furlough across the last year, really. So although 2 years in July, working time out of that will be a little bit under that, but yeah, almost 2 years.
So had you been, you'd have been there knocking on a year before you went into furlough?
Yeah, so July 2019, I started, end of July. So yeah, what will it be, 8-9 months before furlough and the pandemic turned everything upside down. And then...
So not working from home, just totally furloughed and waiting to be activated, I suppose.
Yeah, totally furloughed for April until I came back 1 day a week in August. I have 2 young children, so it was kind of a mutual thing. Candlelighters were very helpful in understanding the pressures that we were at the beginning of that, you know, trying to work from home whilst homeschooling the kids. So it was, you know, a decision that helped protect the charity's finances. And also helped alleviate some of those pressures at home. So, you know, I was really grateful for switching one full-time role to becoming Mr. Salt, the teacher of, whilst my wife became Mrs. Salt, the teacher of. So yeah, but it was quite difficult that as well in, you know, a job that I love doing and then being sidelined in a way, you know, through something that needed to happen. And I was fully occupied and immersed in being the teacher. But yeah, kind of a weird thing as well, almost like watching everything from the outside of the place that I love to work and a cause that I'm very passionate about. So yeah, an unusual time.
So, I mean, was the teaching the thing that gave you the kind of structure through the days of, because, you know, you get sick of looking at the inside of your house and you get sick of doing your standard walk each day. You will, don't you?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, so I think yeah, we were very structured in that way. So we did put a timetable up on the wall, as much for ourselves as well as the kids. You know,
Yeah.
we get up and have breakfast as a family. We would start at a certain time each day. We'd take lunch more or less at the same time each day, finish as well. So yeah, just to help us all, that kind of structure really helped.
Yeah. So how's it going back into, are you back in the office yet? Are you working from home, or are you normally out of the office anyway?
Yeah, a little bit of a hybrid. So yeah, kind of back. So after Christmas, came back full time. Although then we went into another lockdown, so I was using furlough and longer lunches to look after the kids.
Mhm.
Whilst my wife went to work, she tends to work the lunchtime hours. So that was quite challenging, switching focus from, doing the day job in the morning, having the kids and lunch, and trying to do some teaching in the kind of middle part of the day, and then switching focus back to work. But then, yeah, the last few months have been kind of working from home, mainly full time. And then since the kind of messaging of stay at home has been lifted, then we've been encouraged to use the office again. It won't go back, to kind of 5 days a week in the office, probably some hybrid
Yeah.
model really of, do what works for you.
Yeah.
But certainly that time in the office where I'm around colleagues and we can, do meetings together and collaborate on things face to face.
So
Looking forward.
how do you go about the fundraising? Is it you just sort of calling people business to business and saying this is what we do? You know, are you looking for their sponsorship teams? Like, how do you go about it?
Yeah, I think it's for me, and I'm still learning this as well. I mean, we're constantly learning anyway, aren't we? But this is the first charity I've worked at, so yeah, still lots to learn. But I think it's there's a multitude of different things. It's inviting businesses, and businesses are people, aren't they? An organization is made up of individuals, and we know that it's good to give. If we do something, whether that's we make a charitable donation or we volunteer, or on a personal level, if we do something that helps somebody else, we might not always do that to feel good about ourselves, but quite a nice byproduct of doing something good for somebody else is that we do feel good. So I suppose I view it as I have the opportunity to give people the opportunity to do something good that will, one, impact on the families we support, but two, make them feel good about themselves as well. So I think it's understanding the business, and it can be that fundraising is a great staff engagement tool to, as we've just said there, make people feel good. That can increase team morale. It can encourage people from different departments and teams to work together who haven't worked together, to come together on something meaningful. So that, yeah, kind of staff engagement can be one thing. Sponsorship is another way, or quite often there can be synergies between our organization and companies as well, in terms of who we support. So we support families. If an organization's products lend themselves to that, it can be that we can create something that adds value both to them and us as well. So something around cause related marketing, where it might be X amount from the sale of a product goes to the charity, so that helps us. It can help the organization with their product and selling their product in the marketplace as well. So yeah, lots of different kind of reasons that a company could want to be involved. And I think my role as a fundraiser is to understand that and help that organization support candlelighters, essentially.
Yeah. So I like my experience with fundraising is sort of, those I've been into places where they're hiring those people that are in the streets that are bothering you in town, of like, can I just stop you for 5 minutes to get a £2 a month donation? How did you get into the fundraising field? Because I previously knew you before when I was working at Leeds City College, and you were an MVQ assessor then.
Yeah.
How did you get into fundraising?
Yeah, and I think this is tied into probably my whole working life, and I've just been speaking, as I've been for a run this month. Well, I say speaking on the downhill bits, I can speak. Some of the uphill bits, it's a struggle. So yeah, we've been talking about. I've kind of had 3 careers, and kind of the 2 before almost decade blocks. So I came out of college and got into retail management, and I think that was because my dad had been a manager, and so my footballing career hadn't taken off. The band hadn't been tapped up as the next Oasis, so that hadn't materialized. And then quite by chance, really, I got a job as a trainee manager at 18 at the now defunct Toys R Us, which pains me to say. And that was great. I spent kind of 10 years in retail. Finished off my retail career at M&S, and there were lots of good things about it, but I just didn't find it very fulfilling. I didn't find it meaningful for myself. But what I did enjoy was, in my role as a manager, I could train and develop people and bring people on. So then that's what I then spent 10 years in, kind of apprenticeships and MVQ world. So selling, well, kind of taking people through their apprenticeships. So that kind of helped me a little bit, kind of fulfill that, giving something back, people development. So that was good. And then in the kind of final years of that stint in apprenticeships and training, I was more selling those as a solution into organizations. So that sales experience then led me to look and see that I got some transferable skills that could translate into charity. So I suppose the retail career, I picked up some aspects of there that were fulfilling to me. Apprenticeships, again, kind of felt like a step closer to charity, although I didn't know it at the time. But kind of profit, and I suppose retail is very much driven by a profit, sometimes, and less so now, but sometimes at the expense of anything else. So I didn't really like that. I felt like I was, making people buy stuff, encouraging people to buy stuff that they didn't need. So then in the apprenticeship world, and where we work together at Leeds City College, obviously that's not for profit. So that kind of felt like a step, but then still didn't really feel completely fulfilled in what I was doing. Again, still didn't find it meaningful enough. And then, unfortunately, one of my colleagues at the time, one of her family members, was supported by Candlelighters. And it was a time when I'd just taken up running in 2019. So I did the Sheffield Half Marathon, was looking for a charity. And as I say, it was at that time that my work colleague's family member was diagnosed. So I raised money for Candlelighters, found out more about the charity and the support that they provided to families. And that was very, very attractive to me in terms of the impact that had on people's lives when they were going through something unimaginable. And I've got kids myself. So I began to find out more about the charity, and was just blown away by what they did. And then, to look back on it without sounding too woo-woo potentially, it seems like things just lined up, and not not in the way that through somebody else's misfortune. That's not what I'm talking about. But
it's kind of like all your skills sort of seem to be the right skill set for this particular role, going that way, and it was interesting and something that you thought was really valuable.
Yes, yeah, and
You know,
they'd had Candlelighters had that vacancy out for a long time and had tried to recruit for it
yeah,
a number of times, and the people weren't quite right.
yeah,
Like almost out, I think, for 6 months, which is a long time to have a vacancy out.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, they must have seen a lot of people. You must have heard that they, because if you're advertising for that long, I mean, I don't know if it's still the case, but sort of since 2008, that you're always hearing about every job's got like 500 applications for it and so on.
yeah,
You must have had people kind of applying, but just not had the right people.
yeah, which if it's just a yeah. To look back on it, it feels like it was there for
Like it was
me.
destiny, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Which sounds woo woo, but yeah,
I think that's kind of the case, though. You kind of see it a lot, with I've talked to a couple of people starting their own businesses and people that have their own businesses. And quite often, especially when you start with sort of going back to their childhood and they kind of go through things, and even people that haven't seen those connections straight away are kind of like, oh, yeah, that kind of, yeah, it all makes sense. They all fit together quite neatly.
yeah,
It's strange how the things work out. But then it's very easy to look back on something and miss out all the other details and go, oh, that's a nice little story.
yes, yeah, yeah, definitely.
So yeah, so are you mainly phone based then, or are you going to the businesses, or yeah, what's your day to day like? How would your normal day be?
Yeah, and it's difficult to answer that question with some restrictions still in place.
Yeah.
Yeah, is there a typical day anymore? I don't know. There's quite a lot of Zoom meetings,
Yeah.
telephone calls, and some of those will be with existing supporters. Some of those will be with potential donors and supporters. So it can be a variety. There has been the odd meeting that I've been able to go to, and those will become more, which I'm really looking forward to, because yeah, I get to go and talk to people about what the charity does, to
Mm,
start partnerships. I
mm,
get to go and encourage people along their journey of fundraising. I get to go at, if it's perhaps a relationship for a period of time, I
mm.
get to go at the end of that and do the big check presentation and talk to people again. We've still got the
That must
big
be
check.
fun. Yeah, that must be fun.
Yeah. And just thinking about that now, we don't really pay by check anymore, do we? But I can't really go with a Bax transfer bank state, a big
Giant receipt.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It doesn't have the same sort of PR magic, does it?
No, no. So yeah, a typical day, it can just vary so much, really. A typical week would involve some of those things. Lots of time on the telephone,
Mm,
speaking to people. Lots of time on Zoom, hopefully, speaking to people. And yeah, hopefully we can transition to more face-to-face,
mm,
in-person stuff, because it just feels better. And I think there's, some time savings and
yeah.
logistical things that Zoom and online
Mm.
meetings can help with. But yeah, we've evolved to be around each other as a species, haven't we? And I think it just feels altogether better
Yeah,
being around people.
yeah. I mean, and like, just that's made me think of sort of the differences. I mean, would you prefer an actual phone call over a Zoom meeting if from a fundraising perspective? Do you think you're making more of a connection with a person on a phone than you can with Zoom, or do you think Zoom has its own benefits?
Yeah, I think the online Zoom and Teams, because you can see people.
Yeah.
So I think that adds an extra dimension that a telephone call doesn't,
Mhm,
particularly when you've not met somebody.
mhm,
so I think that's good. I think it's a balance as well. You know, we talk about people having Zoom fatigue, and I certainly know a lot of our team meetings and all charity meetings take place over Zoom. And if you've had half a day of that, to add more Zoom can be a challenge. So I think I think in terms of connecting, I think it's good to have the option, and it is something I will always give the person I'm speaking to the option of choosing, because I think some of it is understanding their workplace. So sometimes I offered it out to somebody and she's like, well, I work on reception, so a phone call's great. So sometimes there's, you know, what works best in terms of the other person's work environment to factor in as well.
I suppose you've got to be very adaptable to people, and you've got to be quite sort of big on your customer service skills. And I mean, it sounds sort of like sales, but without the, you know, the sort of hard sell. Is that fair?
Yeah, it is. And I think that's it. You know, those transferable skills were from a sales environment. The end product, if you like, is very different. So, you know, from my Marks and Spencer's days of selling people tins of baked beans and things, which were a necessity. But maybe people didn't feel that great having bought their tin of beans. You know, now the end result is people are making a difference to other people's lives. So, but yes, those kind of key things of influence and, you know, persuasion, being able to talk to people and connect with people and build rapport, are essential, you know, as they were in the sales role as well.
I mean, because you mentioned transferable skills a couple of times, and I've mentioned it myself already in a couple of other interviews, but I haven't really sort of delved into it. And I think you'd be a good person to kind of explore this with. So, I mean, obviously in an employment sort of environment, you always hear about transferable skills, and it seems very difficult for a lot of people, especially if they've been in a particular sector or a particular role for a long time. You know, you get into this sort of, well, I only know how to do this job. I don't. How would I do another job? I've heard a lot of people say those kind of things. How did you, like? Did you always just realize that these skills could transfer into a different sector, a different industry, or like, I would imagine if you didn't before, by the time you were doing the apprenticeship work, you'd be thinking like that. So you'd be looking for people's like, well, this skill you can use in any job, this skill you can use in any job. Like, how did you kind of hear about transferable skills? What's your relationship to it, and how good are you at kind of identifying those for yourself?
Yeah, well, I suppose probably through my own changes of career, you know, switching from retail into apprenticeships, I probably in hindsight recognize that was a change, but the things I've learned in my management role and in retail about customer service and leading people and how retail works all then helped me deliver that knowledge to apprentices in those areas, and, you know, things like business administration and those things. So I've probably seen myself switch and take those skills with me into a new career. And then, you know, working with apprentices who, you know, could be doing a business admin apprenticeship in one environment, but, you know, every organization needs some administration. So, you know, and a lot, you know, it can be different in one business and one sector and different in another one. So I suppose seeing the bigger picture and trying to impart that to other people, you know, as they were 16, 18, potentially, not everybody was that young, you know, some people were doing a management qualification at a later stage, or a team leader to help with their development. So but yeah, it was all. Sometimes I would hear grumblings of, oh, I don't really like where I work, or like you said there, I'm here, but I'd like to be in this different role. So I think seeing people transition themselves and talk about my own journey probably helped a lot with that realization of transferable skills. And I think as well, reflecting on myself, that I think it was, rather than, as you put it there, having almost like a closed mindset, I've only done this job, you're
Yeah.
already talking yourself into that place. Whereas actually, if I broaden that out and think, where else could these skills be useful, I think that's much more open. And you will then see opportunities, rather than closing down any opportunities by thinking, this is the only place I can work because these are the only skills
Yeah.
I've got.
And I think some of that as well is, kind of, I think for myself, when I initially looking at sort of my job roles, when I was looking at other roles, I'd be like, well, I'm doing X skill or whatever for this, but you don't necessarily think, you think of doing it in that industry, in that role a lot of the time. And like you say there, it's defining what the actual thing you're doing is, what the actual skill is, and then going, right, well, that's applicable to so many other things and so many other roles and industries and so on. So whether it's, like event planning or something like that, it's like,
Yeah.
if you've worked in theatre and you've worked on a show, you've also done event planning. And if you put a little conference or you've put a meeting on, it's still event planning. They scale up in different ways, but you still have to go through, like, getting a room, getting catering, getting all the people invited, making sure they've turned up, making sure that they've got all the details. Like, they're kind of basics of your event planning. There isn't a question here.
No. But I think it's and I don't know whether this is just myself or people at large, I think it's recognized. It's quite easy because you only see it through your own eyes to gloss over or not fully recognize what skills and things you've built up over that period of time. So like you say, until you start thinking and breaking it down, maybe getting a little bit more granular on what was involved in something, then actually give yourself credit for those things.
Yeah.
That then can be, well, actually, I have done X, Y, and Z. Or, if you're looking at a person specification for somewhere you think you might like to move into, to start looking at those job descriptions and then start relating, and person specifications, and then start relating, oh, well, actually, yeah, I might not have done that in that context as a fundraiser, using my own example, but I've done it in a sales environment over here. So if I can talk about that, and put it across in a way that actually says, not done it in that environment, but I have done it here, and here's my example of it, then I think, you can demonstrate to yourself. And if you can believe it yourself, you can demonstrate it to other people as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I haven't built this house before, but I have built a house before. So.
Yes. Yeah. Good analogy.
Yeah. So let's go into Candlelighters a bit more then. So as I say, I wasn't familiar with them before. Are they a fairly new charity then? Have they been around for years or?
Yeah, so we started in 1976, so 45 years, and we've grown in that time. We're still probably classed as a small to medium-sized charity. There's around 25 staff who work there. But yeah, when we first started, it was very much kind of financial grants that we provided, and being on a journey as a charity then to always see how we could better support and serve the families that we do based on what need there is there. So we now grow where we provide, emotional, financial, practical support. We've got accommodation that we've purchased and renovated, a 4-bedroom property. That means families can stay in safe, clean accommodation that's close to the hospital, and there's no charge for that.
Yeah.
So we've evolved a lot over that period of time as well, and we will continue to evolve so that we can continue to better serve families who we support.
Obviously, with the past year, I mean, and with everyone on furlough, I mean, was it everybody on furlough, or did you have like sort of skeleton crew still sort of working?
Yeah, it was a skeleton crew, really. So there was a couple of us fully furloughed, those who had kids, I think, really, or where the job role was that there was no requirement in the current setting. So, for example, because everything was closed down, we didn't need any volunteers. Therefore, the person who looked after volunteers, wasn't required at that time. So there was a mix, really, Simon, of fully furloughed to full-time working and everything in between, really, on that spectrum.
Yeah. I mean, it's because it's an odd thing. So you're working in an area where you're trying to bring in more revenue and, like both to sustain the organization and to grow the organization. And then it's kind of, well, stay at home for a while while we go through this crazy thing. It's got to be kind of strange coming back to it now. Like, because as well, so many businesses are in this weird transition phase of like, some people are in, some people are not in, or nobody's gone in yet. So just starting up again, is it much harder now than it was before, or is it not worth doing yet? What's the situation at the moment?
Yeah, and I suppose it's the view you take of it. A lot of the supporters we have supported us for a while, and will probably continue to support us for a while as well. And I think it's relational.
Yeah.
And I think, yes, we need to sustain as a charity, obviously, but I think it's maintaining a relationship throughout that time period. And organizations go through peaks and troughs.
Yeah.
Yes, we're all, a lot of organizations who support us have really struggled. We've got some hospitality supporters who totally closed, same with retail. And conversely, we've had, others maybe in the technology sector where there's been a real upswing for them. And, it's kind of about growth. And actually, they've struggled perhaps to give us as much time because they've been so busy, as opposed to those who, just haven't been open at all. So I think it's understanding that, and people are still invested in the cause, even if they might not be able to give at that time.
Yeah.
And actually, what's important to me is to maintain that relationship.
Yeah.
Throughout that period of time. If that's how things with you, it's not great. Let's have a talk about that. Is there anything I could do to help?
Yeah.
That might help in that situation. And I think I think it goes back to kind of heading into meetings and conversations with, how can I help you?
Yeah.
Essentially, rather than how can I raise money out of you?
Yeah.
Which is not, I think short term that maybe works, but long term for me as an individual as well, that just feels better.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely a lot of in-office fundraising, I think, has been difficult, but then it's been great to see how businesses have adapted and come up with their own ideas about how things can be different. So yes, you might not be in the office, but if we want to do a wear pink to work day, we can still do that, whether we're from home or in the office. things like challenge events. So the things like, the Great North Run and the Leeds running events and York running events and marathons and things. Businesses have reimagined those, which has been really great to see. So one of our supporters, Shoesmiths, did a trek across America, which was great. And then another of our supporters did a Tour de CDS. So they did a race, because the competitive element in fundraising helps fundraising. So they did a race between all their different locations, which involved running, cycling and rowing, because they've an office in Ireland. So it's just been really good to see how people have wanted to continue to support the cause, have actually found something that's been able to bring everybody together, even though everybody's working from home and in different offices, and had a good time and being creative with that. So
well, still being so as you were talking there, I mean, I said initially it sounds quite salesy, but obviously you've got quite a lot of business relationship management going on there as well, Laura. So is there ever any tension between that sort of bringing money in and also managing the existing relationships, or does it balance quite nicely because you're a charity and you don't have that financial pressure of like get the money, but you do as well, because it's like we're a charity, we're not selling stuff, we need the money to do our thing. So how does that work?
And again, salespeople will have different mindsets. I have a financial target, as you say, so that we can deliver the services to families and provide what we need to provide. And, that gets talked about on a monthly basis, because I think sometimes there's a perception that, it's a charity. Yeah, but the charity won't exist if we have to operate as a business, profit and loss and everything else. So that does take place. So yes, I have a financial target, but I think for myself, again, it's what things do I need to do that would deliver that financial target? So take the pressure off myself, and actually, what are the things I'm in control of? I can't control whether a business wants to partner with us. I can have a great conversation. I can talk about the difference we make. I can encourage them to do that. But ultimately, the decision and at what level they want to be involved is entirely up to them. So, I can't influence the amount they want to be involved at, but I can make sure that I look after our existing supporters so that they're recognised and thanked and supported along their journey, as I say, relevant to what they want to do for their organisation, so that it delivers that. So I think it's that understanding of that. It is sales, but it's customer service. Essentially, it just goes back to understanding that organisation, the people who work there, what's important to them, and how can I support them on that. And I think where there's clarity on that and a congruence, then it becomes easier to support them along that journey. And those are the conversations with potential new supporters as well, is, this is who Candlelighters are, this is what we do. But really help me understand your world. What's important to you as a business? What's important to you as an individual? And is there something we can create that's mutually beneficial from here on in? And sometimes there is, and sometimes there isn't. And sometimes there isn't straight away, but there is further down the line. And
because I mean, you must be sort of, now isn't the right time for us, but then some people will come back. I mean, you hear it a lot of like, oh no, not now, but that doesn't automatically mean a no, and some people will kind of come back. Is the job mostly is it mostly in your head? You know, is it like, oh, I know this business and those people there, so it's all sort of in your mind because you're actually building, you know, actual relationships with people, or is it very kind of database driven and you're kind of like, right, who are these people? Yes, I remember them. I know what they're doing. Like how I suppose you'll have a spectrum of these relationships. That's are they mostly quite, what's the word I'm looking for here? Like, are they quite kind of, do you know people quite well from it, or is it really just much more professional, sort of collegiate kind of level? What how does that kind of work out?
Yeah, it depends really, because individuals are also different.
Yeah,
I, I'm fairly open book. I have a little kind of three kind of bullet point kind of value system that I kind of operate on a daily basis. So every day I'll kind of think, right, I'm going to be fab. So it's a mnemonic that is fun, authentic, and brave. So that's kind of in the morning. That's how I set my day up, which might sound a bit cliche, and people might be vomiting in their mouths as I say that, but it works for me.
it's a system.
It's a system, yeah, and it just reminds me, you know, and my kids are the same as well. Like, you know, when they go off to school, right? Have fun, be brave, be kind. That is just our household type of thing, and you know, it seems to work for them. It seems to work for all of us. But so yeah, authenticity to me is being open, and having those conversations. So yeah, there's people who I have relationships with where I know about the family life. I know what job the other half does, how old the kids are, what they enjoy doing. And there's others where it is more professional, and everything in between. And yeah, before children, I used to have quite a good memory. So I would be able to remember quite a lot of stuff off the top of my head about people. Post sleepless nights and broken sleep and those things, I have a bit more of a reliance on a database. And there's only me at Candlelighters who looks after businesses, and we've probably got about 150 businesses who will support us. So being able to remember
you can.
everything, and there's multiple relationships at those businesses as well. So I'd like to think I do a fairly good job, but yeah, there's only so much bandwidth I've got to play with. So, but yeah, it's great to be able to, because some of those relationships almost be, there's a number that I would almost class as a friendship, really, as opposed to some sort of master servant. I think sometimes in fundraising can have the mindset of, you know, going with the begging cup, please support us. Whereas actually, as I say, back to the kind of mindset thing, is that I'm giving opportunity to businesses and individuals to feel good. And support a great cause that makes a difference. So I think then when you view things as a partnership of equals, then why wouldn't you have a great relationship if the other person's open to that? But we are all different, aren't we? You know, some people have a professional life and that's how they like to operate, and they're maybe very different outside, and you know, that's fine. So
yeah, but it means you have to be quite flexible. You have to switch between, you know, your kind of more professional persona to your more friendly persona and kind of navigate through that. When you came into the role, I'm imagining that a lot of those relationships were already established. Was it difficult at all slotting into that and kind of working out where people wanted to be pitched at, and you know, what they expected from you as a business? Did you have any sort of, oh, it's somebody different doing this now, I'm not sure about the company?
Yeah, because people do relate to people, and obviously Candlelighters is and will always be Candlelighters, but yeah, the interaction with Candlelighters is very much dependent on the person who they're speaking to. So it has, and I've had there hasn't always been only me in the team. A couple of colleagues left at the beginning of this year, and they held and maintained a lot of those relationships. So that has been a challenge, really, is understanding building up those relationships,
Mm.
particularly, well, it's like forming a new friendship, really, or going on a date with somebody. It's like, oh, how is this going to be? Are there going to be any awkward silences? What is the other person interested in?
Yeah.
Um, and then I think, again, a realization for me is, how can I help this other person get to know me? Like, how can we've set up a meeting? How can I help the other person have a really good meeting?
Yeah.
And again, that just changes things so that you're trying to see things through their eyes. And again, if I'm then authentic and open,
Mm.
that should hopefully help the other person. And I'm genuinely interested in them as an individual and what's important to them.
Yeah.
Then again, it's a two-way thing. They have a great meeting and get to know me, and I get to know them. So it kind of works on a lot of different levels, really. But yeah, it can be daunting, with some of those. But, if they're long-standing and they've had a great relationship with the previous fundraiser,
Yeah.
I'm quite susceptible to self-doubt anyway. So I'll be like, oh, what if they don't have a great relationship with me? And what if they stop supporting candlelighters?
It'll all be my fault.
It'll all be my fault. Yeah, my career in fundraising will be short-lived.
When you were saying then, it made me think again of going back to earlier in the conversation of like, again, transferable skills and sort of the previous experience. I mean, your background comes in handy there, like not just the customer service stuff and the organization from retail, but also the coaching and developing sort of side with people, because I suppose part of the relationship as well is like they're getting to know you, but they're also getting to know the organization, especially someone new coming in. So you're always able to give them a little bit more information about what's going on and what's happened with a particular case or something else that you're doing, so that they're constantly learning. So you've got it sounds to me like you've got quite a few good icebreakers to go into any kind of fresh meeting, from your football experience to your sales experience to your assessing experience. So do I have a question with this? I don't think I do. But yeah,
Well,
is there anything to respond to there?
yeah, well, it's interesting as well. So going back to what you said about kind of childhood and things like that. So as I mentioned, I moved to Cornwall. So when I I was born in Scarborough. I don't know if that's allowed on this podcast, but too late now. Cat's out of the bag. So within Scarborough, I moved school once. Then I moved to Cornwall and was at primary school because of the time we moved. I was in year 6 for just after Easter, so just one term.
Yeah.
I went to secondary school. So that was another change of, well, 2 schools really. And then I came back up north. So that was another change of school. And then I went to our school didn't have a sixth form or anything like that. So I went to a different college. So I think there was always the need to be able to connect with people and make friends quickly.
Yeah.
And maybe some of this is fitting in and settling in and things. So yeah, it was important to kind of be able to build relationships quickly. And obviously I would never think in those terms as a 7 or 8, year old changing school for the first time. But reflecting back, I think it is those things and remembering who people are, maybe their likes and dislikes.
Yeah.
That helped me settle in.
Yeah.
And then not even thinking about, kind of a career in school, doing those things. And then that's continued throughout. So apprenticeships, I would be notified of, right, you've got this apprentice in this company and that's the manager, off you go.
Yeah.
right, so you're walking into somebody else's workplace to meet people you've never ever met before. And off you go, and you need to build that relationship and trust, and they need to believe in your competence and integrity in what you're doing. And can you assimilate these generic competencies that the apprentice will need to demonstrate? Can you then make that applicable to that individual workplace in that individual sector?
Yeah.
So you're having to be really flexible with those things as well. And there's a line in an Ian Brown song which kind of sticks out to me, and he's using it in a way that's, I think, meant to be kind of denigrating and not a positive aspect. But the line is, you're a social chameleon, you change to suit the people around you. And there is that adaptability to help kind of connect with somebody wherever they are. So I've volunteered with homeless charities in the past and given up a lot of my time to people who are homeless on the streets, and I'll just stop and have a conversation with that individual at the level they're at. And then, yes, in my day job now, we're dealing with law firms and accountants and the professional financial services industry. But I would like to think that I can connect with somebody there as well as I can with somebody who's got nothing, and lots of different things in between. I think that social chameleon is really an adaptability and flexibility to just connect with people, really.
Do you think you sort of, how am I phrasing this? Well, what I basically want to ask is, sort of from your perspective, that social chameleon aspect, do you think your adaptability and your ability to kind of pitch these things at the different levels comes from sort of having that wide experience, or do you think that that's something that's, like you say, sort of from school, is more developed in you, of like you're able to pick up social cues, you're able to kind of look for things of like familiar ground, of like, oh, they mentioned that, they must be into this. If I start talking about that, that's a good sort of icebreaker. Which way do you think that developed? Do you think it's a bit of both, or do you think it's more one or the other?
Yeah, good question. It's a little bit chicken and egg, isn't it, really? Yeah. I don't know, because I don't know how strong a part that kind of change in school really played. Would I have been like this anyway? Was some of it in my nature? I've got 7 sisters, 3 brothers, so is some of it kind of family life and that kind of nature environment? I suppose I've always been regarded as, interestingly, as somebody who would be outgoing. Actually, I would regard myself as probably sitting in between introvert, extrovert. I like time on my own, but I do like to be around other people. I think there's ambivert, I think, is the middle ground, if I've remembered that right. I created a new category of people. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know really. I suppose there's lots of, playing football a lot, team sport, building relationships with those other players and understanding them. And he's got the ball, I know he's gonna leg it, so I need to sit behind to support him. There's that element. I suppose being in a band and performing, there's a reliance on those other people and a kind of shared understanding with those, whilst also, I remember one particular write-up talked, and this isn't blowing myself up, this is just relevant to what we're saying, but like about me making a connection with the crowd, and I didn't have a microphone, so it wasn't, delivered through that. So yeah, I don't know really. is where I've arrived at. It doesn't answer any question.
No, I don't know is a perfectly good answer. People should accept that more. Like, I think we feel a lot of pressure to always know an answer or always be right now. And it's like, well, no, we're people, we're human. We don't know everything and we get things wrong.
Yeah.
I think it's good to kind of remind ourselves of that occasionally. I think, from what you said as well, though, I think it's a constantly developing skill set that reinforces itself, like you said, from the football to the, to the various other jobs, it's and the bands, and you're always, well, we're always working on how we work with other people, and and how much energy we can give to that. For some of us it's kind of like, oh, enough of people, and for other people it's like, more people, more.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of those, I think, some of it's just a dice roll of like how those things land for you. But from what you've said, I think it's it's a skill set that's part of your personality that it sort of enriches itself naturally. It's a positive feedback is what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, so it becomes a feedback loop, but all those things are developable trainable. You like, the first time of speaking to somebody who was asking for money on the streets is a time of, well, I don't know what to say. Will I say the wrong thing? All that, but take it down to its base level. It's just about connecting with another human being.
It's just talking to someone.
Yeah. At its most basic fundamental level. And I think that's it with a lot of work, is whether that's your work colleagues or if you've got a customer facing role. Well, you either have internal customers or external customers or both. So I think that's what it comes down to, really, isn't it? Is the ability to interact with other people.
It comes down to the ability to interact with other people. There's bonus material for this interview, which will be posted on the Patreon once I have some subscribers there. If you're listening to this and you qualify to be a guest on this show, that is, if you are in Leeds, whether you live here but work outside the city, or you live outside the city and work here, or if you are from Leeds and you're working abroad or in any other UK city, get in touch. Tell me what you do. What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? What might you do different? Or instead, why do you do it? Please remember to like, share and subscribe to this show. Please become a Patreon. It's only £1 a month. So go to www.patreon.com/workinghoursepod to become a regular supporter. I will get to 1,000 of these, but I will do it quicker if you like, share and provide financial contributions so that we can raise the operating ability to reach those 1,000 loiners. And of course, for any loiner listening to this, the biggest help is you coming on the podcast. It's not scary and it's not stressful, and your voice will sound so much better with intro and outro music bracketing it. You can also appear anonymously if that helps. I'm really interested to hear from anyone in Leeds or from Leeds in whatever industry, sector or role you are in. What is your experience? How do you feel about work? What do you like and not like? What do you do, Leeds? Email this podcast now, workinghourspod@western-studios.com, with a short bio and some suggestions of your availability to #BeMyGuestLeads, or just send your feedback, questions, comments and queries. You can also follow this show on Twitter @WorkingHours3 and on Instagram @WorkingHoursPodLeads. Next time on Working Hours, I will be speaking to someone else, and you will find out about that next time. Same Leeds time, same Leeds channel. Working Hours is presented, edited and recorded by Simon Treen for Western Studios Leeds Limited. The music was The Bees from Chopin's Etudes, which is in the public domain and was taken from museopen.org.